Okay, so factor by grouping. Let's look at number 1. You have 10ab plus 15b plus 4a plus 6. So 10ab plus 15b plus 4a plus 6. All right, now remember, first thing you always need to do is look at your polynomial, and how many terms do you see here? 4. Do those 4 terms have anything in common besides the number 1? No, so the GCF is 1. Okay, so since GCF is 1, I'm not going to write it like I did the previous problems. Remember we said in the previous problems that when we just did, let me get to it real quick. So like this, how we wrote it as a GCF times a polynomial. GCF times this, GCF times this. All right, here, because the one we had, the GCF is 1, so I'm not going to say 1 times this again, right? It's just 1. I mean, it's just this. Okay, now, so first thing you do is look for a GCF. Now, we're going to do one where there's a GCF other than 1. Okay, now the next thing you ask yourself is this. How many terms do you see? 4. All right, there are 4 terms. Usually what happens is this. When you have 4 terms, you want to try grouping. So 4 terms, we're going to try grouping. For us right now, what works is this. You're going to group the first 2, and you're going to group the last 2. So you're going to factor by grouping. So basically, you're going to group the first 2 terms, and you're going to group the last 2 terms. Now, it is very similar. That idea is going to be similar to the one you just did. And so, meaning this. You remember when I did number 7, 8, and 9 in the previous part? I underlined these. You're going to see that structure again with this part. So I underlined the first 2, underlined the second 2. First group, second group. Okay? Now notice when I underlined these right here, if I look at this group right here, those are factors. X is a factor, and what's the other factor? X plus 5. But notice that this is a product of factors, right? And this is a product of factors. This right here is a product of factors, y and x squared minus 3. So what you want to do is that same idea here. You want to rewrite this binomial, or these 2 terms rather, as a product of factors. So then you're going to think about, well, in this group, what's the GCF? What's the GCF of this group? 5. A, there's not an A in common. 5b. So the GCF is 5b. So you're going to say 5b times, just like you did before. 5b times what is 10ab? 2a. Plus 5b times what is 15b? 3b? Nope. Just 3. Because b times b is b squared. So you should always check yourself, right? Okay, now factor by grouping. So when you do the next group, now listen carefully, that's going to be important in the third problem we're going to look at. When you factor by grouping, the next group, you're gonna remember how we looked for the GCF and we factored out the GCF? Here, when you find the GCF and you factor it out, always use the sign that's that middle symbol right here. So you're going to factor out a plus GCF, a positive GCF. So if you look at the second group, what's your GCF? 2. So you're going to say plus, always bring that down, plus 2 times, and let's think about what goes inside here. A positive 2 times what is 4a? 2a. A positive 2 times what is 6? Plus 3. Now, we go back to the previous problem we did. Look at this. These 2 things I had underlined, what do they have in common right here? Do they have something in common? Yes. They had what in common? X plus 5. So my GCF is x plus 5, and I factored it out. Notice the similarity. See the similarity between them now? This and this. So if you look at this, what do these two terms have in common? 2x plus 3. So your GCF is 2x plus 3. Huh?
2a plus 3.
I'm sorry, yeah, 2a plus 3. Thank you. So the GCF is 2a plus 3. And one more step and you're done. Just like you did in number 7, number 8, and number 9. That's the idea there. So the answer will be, in parentheses, the GCF. And what's the GCF? 2a plus 3 times, and what's going to be inside that parentheses? 5b plus 2. There's your answer. So you factor. Remember, factoring means to rise a product. So I wrote this polynomial, which had 4 terms. I wrote as a product of 2 binomials. That's what I did. So if I were to FOIL this out, I would get the original back. That's what would happen. If I FOIL this out, I get this back. First, outer, inner, last. Okay, number 2. Suppose we have this one. 6x cubed minus 15x squared plus 2x minus 5. 6x cubed minus 15x squared plus 2x minus 5. All right, remember, first thing you should always do is GCF. What's your GCF of those 4 terms?
We're doing all 4, we're splitting them up.
No, you got to find the GCF first of all your terms. What is your GCF? 1. GCF is 1. So since the GCF is 1, I'm going to go directly now to grouping because I have 4 terms. For us, we're going to do the first group and the last group. From the first group, what's the GCF of the first group? Just the first.
3.
3 what?
3x
3x squared. So that's 3x squared times, and what goes inside the parentheses? 3x squared times what is 6x cubed? 2x minus 3x squared times what is 15x squared? 5. So that's what I have so far. All right, now I'm going to do the second group. We're going to bring down the plus symbol. Now look at the second group. What's the GCF of the second group? 1. I do need to put that 1. Remember, that's going to bring us back to this one that we did earlier. Remember this one right here? I put a 1 right here. Okay, that's going to be important to put that 1 there. So you're going to say plus what? 1, because that's your GCF, times, and what goes inside the parentheses? 2x minus 5. If I'm doing this correctly, if this is factorable by grouping, then these two parentheses should have the same factor. And now, what's the GCF? 2x minus 5. Okay? Now, before we move further with this one, let's go back to that sheet we had. Let's kind of review what we're doing. So, factoring by grouping. The first thing you should always do is look for a GCF. And we're about to have one where there's a GCF other than 1. But once you find it, the next thing is this. Arrange the terms so that the first 2 have a common factor and the second 2 have a common factor. It said arrange the terms. For us, you keep in that same order. So you group the first 2, you group the last 2. All right, so step 2 would be for each pair, first pair, second pair, find the GCF and factor it out. What should happen at this point is that these 2 factors right here should be the same. If they're not the same, which they will be for us right now, if they're not the same, then basically what's going to happen is that you're going to have to rearrange the terms, and that's what step 4 says. Step 4 says if step 2 does not produce a common binomial factor, then rearrange the terms and try again. Okay? But we're not going to have that situation right now. All right. Okay, so my GCF is 2x minus 5, and then one more step and you're done. You factor out the 2x minus 5, and in parentheses, you're going to say 2x minus 5 times what?
3x squared plus 1.
3x squared plus 1. So there's your answer. All right, let's do number 3. Number 3, we have 5xy minus 8x minus 10y plus 16. So 5xy minus 8x minus 10y plus 16. Okay, so first thing you should always do is look for the GCF of all your terms, of the polynomial. What is it? It's just 1. So now remember, what works for us will be the grouping the first two, the last two. So if I group the first two, and if I group the last two. From the first group, what's the GCF? Just x, right? So I can factor out an x, and I get x times what? 5y minus 8. Okay, now, before we go on, let's go back and look at numbers 1 and 2. When I did 1 and 2, see that when I went to that second group, I factor out the GCF I factor out in both of these were positive because that was my middle sign. So I just brought down that middle sign. So I factor out a positive 2. I factor out a positive 1. This time, though, my middle sign is what? Negative. So I'm going to factor out a negative GCF. So if we look at 10y and this is really negative 10y. If we look at negative 10y and 16, what's the GCF? 2. But I'm going to factor out, though, a negative GCF. So it'll be a negative what? 2. And now, remember, it's negative 2. You factor it out. So negative 2 times what is a negative 10y? 5y. Negative 2 times 5y is negative 10y. Negative 2 times what is a positive 16? Not what kind of 8? Negative or positive? Negative 8. If you're doing this, if this is factorable by grouping, then these two binomials should be the same. Should be the same factor. So now my GCF is 5y minus 8. And so I can factor out the GCF. So my answer is going to be, in parentheses, 5y minus 8 times what? X minus 2. So you can always check yourself. 5y minus 8 times x is this. 5y minus 8 times a negative 2 is this. Okay? All right, number 4. Suppose we had this one. 7 plus y, that's a y, minus 3xy minus 21x. So write this down. 7 plus y minus 3xy minus 21x. Okay. For this polynomial, what's the GCF? 1. How many terms do you see? Now, I don't see 3 terms. How many terms do you see? 4. 7, positive y, negative 3xy, and negative 21x. Since I have 4 terms, I'm going to try factoring by grouping. For us, what's going to work for the moment will be group the first 2 and group the last 2. The first group, what's the GCF? 1. So when you write it there, you got to say that 1. That's going to be important. So you're going to say 1 times what? 7 plus y. From the second group, I'm going to factor out a positive or a negative GCF? A negative. All right, let's find the GCF though. What's the GCF of a negative 3xy and a negative 21x?
3.
Okay, so 3x. So I'm going to factor out a negative 3x, right? Okay, now let's talk about what happens now. Negative 3x times what is a negative 3xy? Y. Negative 3x times what is a negative 21x? Positive 7. Now that's 7x because x times x is x squared. You need to check yourself on that. Okay, so if you say 7x, you better check it. And if you had said 7x, let's suppose you did say 7x, you notice, well, this is 7 plus y, this is y plus 7x, that's not the same, right? So maybe I did something wrong. All right. Now, let me ask you this. Are these two things the same right here? Yes. Remember, addition is commutative. Addition is commutative. Meaning that the order in which you add does not matter. 4 plus 6 is the same as 6 plus 4. That's what that means. So 7 plus y is the same as what? Y plus 7. Addition is commutative. So the GCF, it doesn't matter whether you say the GCF is 7 plus y or y plus 7. Does not matter. I normally put the variable first. So I'm going to put y plus 7. So let's factor out the y plus 7. So if I factor out y plus 7, in parentheses, I'm left with what? 1 minus 3x. And so there's your answer. Okay? All right, let's look at number 5. All right, suppose in number 5, all right, number 5, I had this. At 6x squared minus 15x minus 4x plus 10. So 6x squared minus 15x minus 4x plus 10. All right. Okay. So, what's the GCF? GCF is not 3.
But all of them is one column.
Is it 1? Okay. All right. It is 1. Yeah, it's 1 because of the 15. Okay. So it's 1, right? Okay. So then I'm going to group the first two and then group the last two. From the first group, what's the GCF? 3x. 3x. That's 3x times what? 2 what? 2x. Minus 5. From the second group, what do you factor out? A negative, and what's a negative what though? What's the GCF? 2. So I'm factoring out a negative 2. And what goes inside the parentheses? Negative 2 times what is a negative 4x? 2x. Negative 2 times what's a positive 10? Negative 5, because a negative times a negative is a positive. And if this is correct, then these two binomials should be the same. So all you do now is just write the answer. So what's the GCF? GCF is what? 2x minus 5. So what's the answer? You'll say 2x minus 5 times 3x minus 2. And you can always check yourself. 2x minus 5 times 3x gives me this. And then 2x minus 5 times a negative 2 gives me this. All right, number 6. Suppose in number 6, you had this. All right, I have 24a squared minus 36a plus 6a minus 9. Just leave it like that for right now. All right, what's your GCF? Huh? 6 will go into 9 evenly, but 3, right? All right, this time we have a GCF. It's 3. So I'm going to factor out the 3, just like we did before. Remember the first set of problems where we had the GCF? So it'll be 3 times, and let's talk about what's inside the parentheses. 3 times what is 24a squared? Not 6. That's 8, right? 8 what? A squared. Minus 3 times what's 36a?
6, 8.
3 times 6 is 18. 3 times what's 36? 12. 12 what? A. 3 times what is 6a? 2a. 3 times what's negative 9? Negative 3. So that's what I have. All right, now we're at a point where, you can have this in your worksheet. Okay, so what's inside the parentheses, though? What's inside the parentheses? I could probably go further with that. Now remember, the direction set to factor. Remember, for us in general, factor means to rise a product, right? And I did. I wrote this polynomial as a product. 3 and this polynomial right here. But when we say factor, we really mean factor completely. So if you look at what's inside the parentheses, if I look at it and rewrite it, I can factor this further. So factor completely means to factor as much as you can. So if you look at this right here, how many terms do you see? 4. So let's try grouping the first 2 and grouping the last 2. And so from the first group, what's the GCF?
It should be 4, right?
4. For what, though?
4A.
4a. So 4a times what? 2a. 4a times what's the negative 12a? Minus 3, right? Okay, over here, that second group, what's the GCF? 1. So I need to say plus what? 1. And what's inside the parentheses? 2a minus 3. And notice that these two binomials are the same. So this right here that I'm pointing to, that this polynomial with 4 terms, I can factor as 2a minus 3 times what? 4a plus 1. Now that's not the answer to the original problem, because the original problem was not this that I'm pointing to. The original problem was this. So what do you think the answer is to the original problem?
3.
Don't forget the 3. 3 times these two things right here, right? So it'll be 3 times, and then these two binomials. 2a minus 3 times 4a plus 1. Okay? All right, now we're going to do more with grouping next time, because I need to do more with the GCF being other than 1. So I'm going to come back and do more with this one on Tuesday. But for your test, if you can do 1 through 5, you're fine, because the factor by grouping will deal with 1 through 5 on your test. This will be more of test 2, where you have a coefficient other than 1. All right? Now, we're going to look at, in a little while, we're not done. In a little while, we're going to look at factoring trinomials. But that's going to be the easy kind, so we need to do a few of those, and then we'll practice more with the next class period.